The Appalachian Trail stretches over 2,000 miles across some of the most remote wilderness in the United States. Every year, thousands of people attempt to hike it. Most finish with stories about nature, peace, and self-discovery. But not all of them. Some hikers disappear without a trace. Others come back. But something about them feels off. And then, there are the ones who make it out safely, only to realize later that they were never truly alone out there. So the question is, if you were miles away from civilization surrounded by nothing but trees, who or what would you trust? Story 1. The Friendly Hiker Who Knew My Name. My name is Daniel. I'm 27 years old, and I work as a freelance graphic designer based in North Carolina. About 2 years ago, I decided to take a break from everything deadlines, clients, city noise, and hike a section of the Appalachian Trail alone. I wasn't completely inexperienced. I had done shorter hikes before, nothing too extreme, but enough to feel confident that I could handle myself out there. At least that's what I thought. I started my hike in early October. The weather was perfect cool, slightly damp with that constant smell of wet leaves and earth that makes everything feel calm. The first day was exactly what I needed. No signal, no notifications, just the sound of my boots against dirt and the occasional rustling in the trees. By the second day, I had gotten into a rhythm. Wake up, pack hike, eat, repeat. Simple. Peaceful. That evening, I arrived at a small campsite. Nothing fancy, just a cleared patch of ground, a fire ring, and a couple of logs for sitting. There was no one there when I arrived, which I honestly preferred. I set up my tent, started a small fire, and cooked a basic meal. It was getting dark fast, the kind of darkness you only get deep in the woods where there's no artificial light at all. I remember thinking how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, but heavy quiet, like the forest was holding its breath. That's when I heard footsteps. Not animals. Human footsteps. Slow, steady, approaching from behind me. I turned around expecting to see another hiker, and I did. A man maybe mid-30s wearing a dark jacket and carrying a backpack. He smiled as soon as I looked at him. "Hey, Daniel," he said. I froze for a second, not because he looked threatening. He didn't. He looked completely normal. But the way he said my name, like he already knew me. I forced a small laugh and said, "Hey." He walked closer casually like we had met before. "Didn't think I'd run into anyone out here tonight," he said. I nodded, trying to play it cool. Yeah, same. But my mind was racing. How did he know my name? I hadn't told anyone I was coming out here. I hadn't posted anything online. And there was no one else at the campsite when I arrived. We talked for a bit. Well, he talked. I mostly listened. He asked me about my hike, my route, how long I planned to stay out. Normal questions. But every now and then he would slip in something off, like he already knew the answers. At one point he said, "You always prefer camping alone, right?" That's when I felt it. That cold feeling in your stomach when something isn't right, but you can't explain why. I asked him his name. He smiled again, but this time it felt different. "You don't need to worry about that," he said. We sat there in silence for a few seconds. The fire crackled between us. Then he stood up. "I'll see you around," he said. And just like that, he walked off into the darkness. No flashlight, no hesitation. Just gone. I didn't sleep much that night. Every sound felt louder. Every shadow looked wrong. The next morning, I packed up as fast as I could and left. When I reached the next shelter, I mentioned the guy to a couple of other hikers. I described him in detail. They looked at each other confused. One of them said, "We've been on this trail for 3 days. Haven't seen anyone like that." That was enough for me. I cut my trip short and went home. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just a coincidence. Maybe he saw my name somewhere on my gear or overheard it somehow. But here's the thing. I checked everything when I got back. My backpack, my clothes. There was nothing with my name on it. Nothing visible. So the question that still keeps me up sometimes is, how did he know? Story 2. Footsteps around my tent all night. My name is Marissa. I'm 31, and I'm a physical therapist from Roanoke, Virginia. I'm not what most people would call an extreme outdoors person. I like hiking. I like being outside. And I like pretending I'm tougher than I actually am. Whenever I buy gear that makes me look like I could survive a zombie apocalypse. Realistically though, I'm the kind of person who brings extra socks, double checks the weather 3 times, and still somehow forgets a spoon. A couple of summers ago, I decided to do a solo overnight section hike on the Appalachian Trail. Nothing dramatic, just one quiet night in the woods to reset my brain after a brutal stretch at work. I'd been dealing with long hours, difficult patients, and one particularly annoying coworker who acted like saying circling back was a personality trait. I needed quiet. I left early in the morning, drove out to the trailhead, and started hiking around 9 a.m. The day itself was beautiful. It had rained lightly the night before, so the trail smelled fresh and earthy, and there was still moisture clinging to the leaves. Everything felt still in a good way. Not dead still, just calm. I passed a few other hikers here and there, mostly couples. One older guy with trekking poles and calves that looked carved out of oak, and a small group of college kids who seemed way too cheerful for people carrying 30-pound packs uphill. By late afternoon, I found a decent spot near a shelter area that already had one tent set up maybe 40 yards away. I could see it through the trees, which made me feel better. Not close enough to be social, but close enough that if I got murdered, at least someone might hear me getting murdered. That was my logic anyway. I set up my tent, cooked a dehydrated meal that tasted like salty wallpaper paste, and watched the light disappear through the trees. At first, it was nice. The normal sounds of the woods made everything feel grounded. Crickets whined, moving through branches, the occasional rustle of something small in the brush. But once it got fully dark, the mood shifted. It's hard to explain unless you've been out there at night. During the day, the forest feels open. At night, it feels like it folds inward. The darkness isn't just around you, it presses in. I got into my tent around 9:30. I read for a bit with my headlamp on, then turned it off and tried to sleep. I must have drifted off for maybe an hour before I woke up to a sound right outside my tent. A footstep. Just one. Slow, heavy. Deliberate. I held my breath and listened. Then another, and another. Someone was walking near my tent, not stumbling, not crashing through the woods, walking, slow enough that I could hear each step sink slightly into the damp ground. At first, I thought it had to be the other camper. Maybe they were just getting up to use the bathroom or check something. That would have made sense if the footsteps had moved away, but they didn't. They kept circling around my tent, not close enough to brush the fabric, but close enough that I could tell they were moving in a loose loop around me. I stayed completely still. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every few seconds, the steps would pause, and in those pauses, the silence felt even worse. Then they'd start again. Slow, crunch, step, crunch, step. I told myself it could be an animal, a deer maybe, but it didn't sound like an animal. There was intention in it, rhythm, weight, human timing. I reached for my phone out of instinct, even though I already knew there was no signal. I had a knife in my pack, because apparently I'm one of those people who thinks owning a camping knife means I've become Liam Neeson. I pulled it out anyway, and just held it, which did absolutely nothing for my mental state, except make me feel like I might accidentally stab my sleeping bag. The footsteps kept going, around and around, sometimes slower, sometimes stopping near the front of the tent. At one point, I heard breathing, or at least I thought I did. A soft exhale close enough that every muscle in my body locked up. I remember staring at the inside wall of the tent, waiting to see a shadow, or a hand, or the outline of someone leaning down to look in. Nothing, just darkness, and that awful sound of someone pacing me, like I was an exhibit in a zoo. I don't know how long it lasted. Time gets weird when you're scared. It could have been 15 minutes. It could have been an hour. At some point it stopped, not faded away. Stopped. That was somehow worse. I kept waiting for the next sound, the next step, the zipper of my tent being touched, anything. But there was nothing. I didn't sleep after that. I just lay there until the first thin gray light started to seep through the trees. The second it was light enough to see, I unzipped my tent and got out. The air was cold and wet, and everything around me looked normal in that annoying way mornings always do after terrifying nights, like the world is gaslighting you. I checked the ground around my tent immediately. At first I didn't see anything, and I actually felt embarrassed. I was already starting to tell myself I had imagined it. Then I walked around to the front of the tent and saw them. Footprints. Not super deep because the ground wasn't muddy enough for that, but clear enough to make out the shape. Boot prints. They looped around my tent in an uneven circle multiple times, back and forth, overlapping in places. They weren't mine. I knew exactly where I had walked the night before. These were larger and more worn on the heel. I followed them as best I could, my stomach twisting tighter with every step. They circled the tent, narrowed toward the entrance, and then stopped. Right in front of the zipper, not turned away, not leading off into the woods. Just a final set of prints facing the tent door, like someone had stood there for a long time. Beyond that, nothing. The ground got rockier a few feet out, so maybe that explained why I couldn't see where they went after. Maybe. But it didn't change how it looked. Like whoever had been out there spent the night walking around me, and then stood right outside the entrance staring at me through a piece of nylon. I packed up in record time. No breakfast, no coffee, no pretending to be brave. Just shoved everything into my pack and got moving. As I passed the other tent, I saw the camper, a middle-aged woman making coffee on a little stove. I asked if she had been walking around during the night. She looked genuinely confused and said no, she'd been asleep. I told her what happened and she got quiet. Then she said something that made the hair on my arms stand up. She asked, "Did you hear footsteps before midnight?" Or after I said I didn't know exactly, probably after. She looked away for a second and said, "I heard them too. I just thought they were you." I asked if she'd looked outside. She shook her head immediately. Absolutely not. That should have made me feel better because it confirmed I wasn't imagining it. It did not make me feel better. We ended up hiking out around the same time, and we stayed within sight of each other most of the way back to the trailhead without officially agreeing to it. Funny how fear creates instant friendships. Once I got home, I told a few people the story, and the reactions were exactly what you'd expect. Some thought it was a creep. Some thought it was another hiker messing with me. One of my friends insisted it was probably just an animal, and I was being dramatic, which was rich coming from a woman who once screamed because a cucumber touched her ankle in the grocery store. But here's the part that still bothers me. The footsteps didn't just pass through camp. They circled, repeatedly, and whoever made them never announced themselves, never shined a light, never said a word. They wanted me awake. They wanted me scared. And the thing that keeps me up even more than the prints themselves is this. If I had unzipped that tent and looked outside in the middle of the night, would anyone have been there at all? Story 3. He was gone for 3 hours, then came back different. My name is Colin. I'm 24, and when this happened, I was living in Knoxville, Tennessee, finishing my last year of graduate school. 3 friends and I planned a weekend hiking trip on part of the Appalachian Trail as one final break before life got serious and turned us all into people who complain about taxes and lower back pain. The group was me, my friend Aaron, Aaron's girlfriend Leah, and our buddy Matt. We'd all known each other for years. Matt especially was the kind of guy you always wanted on a trip like that. He was funny without trying too hard, calm under pressure, and had enough trail experience to make the rest of us feel less stupid. If somebody had to get eaten by a bear statistically, I felt safest standing next to Matt. The first day was great. We drove out early, started hiking mid-morning, and settled into the usual group rhythm of talking for 20 minutes, then walking in silence for 10, then arguing about whether trail mix is secretly terrible. The weather was warm but overcast, which made the woods feel dim even in the afternoon. The trail wasn't packed, but it wasn't deserted either. We passed a few hikers and exchanged the standard nods and quick small talk. Everything felt normal. By late afternoon, we reached an area where the trail forked near a side path leading to a spring and a primitive campsite. We dropped our packs and decided to stay there for the night. Leah and Aaron went to filter water. I started setting up tents. Matt said he was going to walk a little farther down the side trail to check whether there was a better spot with less slope. Totally ordinary decision. He even joked, "If I'm not back in 10 minutes, assume I found a Hilton." We laughed and he headed off. 10 minutes passed, then 20. At first we didn't worry. Matt was the most capable one there. If anything, we figured he'd found some scenic overlook and gotten distracted. But after about 40 minutes, Aaron called out for him. No answer. Leah tried yelling too. Nothing. We grabbed flashlights even though it was still light out under the canopy and headed down the trail he'd taken. We found no sign of him. No dropped gear, no footprints we could confidently identify. Nothing. Just woods. I kept telling myself there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe he looped back around and we missed each other. Maybe he wandered farther than he meant to. But that explanation started to fall apart when an hour turned into 2. Then 3. By that point, the mood had gone from mildly concerned to deeply wrong. We debated calling for help, but we had almost no service and no clear way to explain where exactly he'd gone. Aaron managed to get a single text through to his brother with our rough location just in case. We kept searching the side trail, shouting until our voices were raw. The sun dropped lower. The woods turned gray, and I started noticing something I hadn't. At first, there were stretches where the forest was completely silent. Not natural quiet. Dead quiet. No birds. No insects. Just the sound of us crashing around, breathing too hard, saying Matt's name over and over, like it would eventually mean something to the trees. Then, just as it was getting genuinely dark, we heard movement behind us. Fast movement. We all spun around. Matt stepped out from between the trees maybe 30 yards away. He looked dirty, sweaty, and exhausted, which made sense. But everything else about him felt off immediately. He wasn't limping. He wasn't panicked. He didn't look like someone who had spent 3 hours lost in unfamiliar woods. He looked distracted, far away, like he was still listening to something we couldn't hear. Leah ran to him first and grabbed his arm, half angry, half relieved. "Where the hell were you?" she asked. He looked at her like he needed a second to remember who she was. Then he said very calmly, "I got turned around." That was it. No details. No rant about how crazy the woods were. No apology, no. You won't believe this. Just flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a card. We brought him back to camp and asked him again what happened. He kept giving vague answers. He said he followed a trail that looked right and ended up somewhere unfamiliar. Aaron asked if he fell or hit his head. Matt said no. I asked if he heard us calling. He paused too long before answering. Then he said, "Not really." That was weird enough on its own, but the thing that bothered me most was the way he was talking. The rhythm was wrong. Matt normally spoke fast, joked, constantly interrupted people, did stupid impressions. Now he was slow and measured, like every word had to pass through a filter first. Around the fire that night, he barely ate. He just sat, staring into the flames. Every once in a while, he'd glance into the woods behind us. Not in a nervous way, but almost expectantly. Like he was waiting for someone, or something. At one point, Leah asked, trying to lighten the mood, "So did you at least find the Hilton?" Matt turned toward her with this tiny smile that didn't reach his eyes and said, "But I found something." Then he looked back at the trees and didn't elaborate. Nobody laughed. I barely slept that night. Aaron and Leah were in one tent, and Matt and I were sharing the other. He didn't move much, but a few times I woke up and realized he was sitting upright, not lying down, just facing the tent wall, like he was listening. Once around maybe 2 a.m., I heard him whisper something. I couldn't make out the words. I asked Matt. He stopped immediately and lay back down. The next morning he acted more normal. Not fully himself, but better. Enough that we all convinced ourselves maybe he'd been dehydrated or just rattled from getting lost. We packed up and headed back. On the drive home, he was quiet, but he answered questions and even made a weak joke about us overreacting. I wanted to believe that was the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next couple of weeks, Aaron told me Matt had been acting strange, missing calls, skipping plans, seeming exhausted all the time. Leah said she ran into him at a grocery store, and he looked right past her like he didn't recognize her at first. Then there was the last thing. About 3 weeks after the trip, Matt finally agreed to meet me for coffee. He looked terrible. Pale, thinner, jumpy. I asked him directly what happened out there. For a while, he just stared into his cup. Then he said, "Do you ever get the feeling that a place doesn't want you to leave?" I laughed a little because I thought he was being dramatic. He didn't laugh back. He told me that when he went down that side trail, he found another path that wasn't on any map he had. He followed it because he thought it might loop back. He said after a while he realized he couldn't hear anything. No birds, no wind, nothing. Then he saw someone standing ahead on the trail, not moving, too far away to make out clearly. Matt called out, but the person didn't respond. They just turned and walked off the trail into the trees. Matt followed them. I asked why. He shrugged and said I thought it was one of you. He said he walked for what felt like maybe 10 minutes. Then he looked around and couldn't find the trail anymore. Just trees in every direction. Then he started hearing someone walking near him, always just out of sight. Not chasing him, guiding him. He said every time he stopped, the footsteps stopped. Every time he moved, they moved too. I asked how he got back. He rubbed his hands together for a long time before answering. Then he said very quietly, "I don't think I did." I remember staring at him, waiting for some sign it was a joke. There wasn't one. He looked terrified of his own sentence. I asked what that meant, and he shook his head, stood up and said he had to go. That was the last real conversation I ever had with him. A month later, he moved out of state without telling most of us. Aaron heard from him once by email, short and vague, saying he needed a fresh start. No explanation, no phone number, nothing. I still think about that weekend more often than I'd like to admit. Maybe he had some kind of mental break. Maybe he got lost, got scared, and came back altered by the experience. That would be the rational explanation. And maybe it's even true. But there's one detail I never told anyone else because it sounds too stupid, too small. When Matt came back out of the woods that evening, one of his bootlaces was tied differently. Not untied, not broken. Tied in a neat, tight knot he never used. I noticed it because we'd joked earlier that day about the weird sailor-style knot his dad taught him and how none of us could copy it. The knot on his boot when he came back was simple, clean, standard. Like someone else had tied it for him. Story 4. The cabin that wasn't empty. My name is Eric. I'm 35 and I work as a maintenance technician in West Virginia. I've spent most of my life around tools, old buildings, and things that creak when they shouldn't. so I'd like to think I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. I know what old wood sounds like when it shifts. I know what animals sound like when they move through walls or brush. And I know that most creepy noises have a very boring explanation if you're willing to look long enough. At least, that's what I believed before this trip. This happened about 3 years ago. I decided to hike a section of the Appalachian Trail alone over a long weekend. Nothing intense, just a couple of days to get out of my routine. The weather wasn't great, overcast, a little colder than expected, and there had been rain earlier in the day, which left everything damp and slightly slippery. By the time I realized I had underestimated how slow the trail would be in those conditions, it was already getting late. I checked my map and saw there was an old shelter a little off trail. Not an official one. More like one of those forgotten structures that hikers occasionally mention online, half abandoned. Not maintained, but still usable if you're desperate. I decided to head toward it instead of trying to set up a tent in the wet dark. The path to the cabin wasn't clearly marked. It looked more like a deer trail than anything meant for people. Branches hung low. The ground dipped unevenly, and at one point, I almost turned back because it felt like I was walking somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. But then I saw it through the trees. A small wooden cabin, crooked, weathered, but still standing. The door was slightly open. That should have been my first sign to leave. Instead, I told myself it was probably just the wind. I walked up slowly and pushed the door open the rest of the way. The inside smelled like damp wood, old dust, and something faintly metallic. There was a simple wooden table, a couple of chairs, and a narrow bed frame with a thin mattress that looked like it had been there since the early 90s. Nothing fancy, but better than sleeping in the rain. I stepped inside and immediately noticed something that didn't fit. The place was old, but it wasn't abandoned in the way I expected. There was a metal cup on the table. Not rusty, not covered in dust. Just there, like it had been used recently. I checked the rest of the room. In one corner, there was a small pile of firewood that looked relatively fresh. Not soaked, not rotting. Cut wood. Someone had been here. Recently. I stood there for a minute listening. Nothing. Just the faint sound of wind outside and the occasional drip of water from the roof. I told myself it was probably another hiker who had used the place earlier that day. Maybe they left in a hurry. Maybe they were coming back. That thought should have made me leave. It didn't. Instead, I decided to stay. I know how that sounds, but at the time it felt reasonable. It was getting darker, the weather was turning worse, and the cabin felt safer than being exposed outside. I closed the door, set my pack down, and did a quick check of the room again. No signs of anyone hiding. No movement. No sound. Just an old cabin. I lit a small lantern and sat down at the table. The light filled the room in a soft yellow glow, pushing the shadows back just enough to make everything feel normal. I even laughed a little at myself for being on edge. I ate a quick meal, drank some water, and tried to relax. But there was a feeling I couldn't shake. Not fear, exactly. More like awareness. Like I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, even though there was no rule saying I couldn't be there. Around 10 p.m., I decided to get some sleep. I laid down on the bed fully clothed and kept my knife within reach. Not because I thought I needed it, but because it made me feel slightly less stupid for staying. I must have fallen asleep for a while because the next thing I remember is waking up suddenly to a sound. A soft, dull thud. Not loud, just enough to pull me out of sleep. I stayed still listening. Then I heard it again. Thud. From somewhere outside the cabin. My first thought was a branch falling or something shifting in the wind. But then I heard something else. A slow scrape, like something dragging lightly across wood. And then, footsteps. Not approaching quickly, not sneaking, just walking. Calm, measured, right outside the cabin. Every instinct in my body told me not to move. I kept my eyes fixed on the door. The lantern was still on, casting just enough light to see the outline of the room. The footsteps stopped right outside. Silence. Then the door handle moved. Not violently, not like someone trying to break in. Slowly, carefully, like someone testing it. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard, I thought I might pass out. The handle turned slightly, then stopped. Whoever or whatever was outside didn't push the door open. They just held it there for a second, then let go. The footsteps started again, moving away this time, around the side of the cabin. I listened as they circled slowly, just like something inspecting the place. At one point, I heard a faint tap on the wall near my head. Just one, like a finger knocking lightly against wood. I don't know how long it lasted. Eventually, the sound stopped completely. No footsteps, no wind, nothing. I stayed awake the rest of the night, barely breathing, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. When the first light of morning finally came through the cracks in the walls, I got up slowly and checked the door. It was still closed, still locked from the inside. I opened it and stepped outside. The air was cold and damp. Everything looked normal, too normal. I walked around the cabin checking the ground. There were marks in the mud near the door, not clear footprints, more like partial impressions, as if someone had been standing there shifting their weight. I followed them as best I could, but they faded quickly into the surrounding ground. No clear direction, no obvious path, just gone. I went back inside to pack my things, and that's when I noticed the last thing, the metal cup on the table. It wasn't where I left it. The night before, it had been near the center of the table. Now, it was closer to the edge. I know how that sounds, like I'm overanalyzing something small. But I am absolutely certain I didn't touch it after I sat down earlier. And I definitely didn't move it in my sleep. I didn't stay another second. I grabbed my gear and left the cabin immediately, not even bothering to eat. I hiked back to the main trail as fast as I could without running. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. And I didn't tell anyone about the cabin while I was out there. I just wanted distance between me and that place. When I got home, I tried to find information about it. Old maps, forums, anything. I found a few vague mentions of abandoned shelters in that area, but nothing specific. No photos, no exact location, almost like it didn't officially exist. I've thought about going back just to prove to myself that it was real, that it was just an old cabin and nothing more. But every time I consider it, I remember that sound. The way the handle moved. Slow. Careful. Like whoever was outside knew exactly how to open the door, and chose not to. and I can't help but wonder if I hadn't locked it that night. Would they have come inside Kayet Luan Vasiat? These stories may sound like something out of a horror movie, but they all come from real experiences shared by people who thought they were just going for a hike. The Appalachian Trail is beautiful, peaceful, and for many life-changing. But it's also vast, isolated, and unpredictable. Out there, miles away from civilization, you rely on your instincts more than anything else. And sometimes, those instincts are the only thing warning you that something isn't right. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. We post new stories regularly, and if you have a story of your own, something strange, unsettling, or unexplainable, you can send it in through the email in the description. You never know. Your story might be featured in the next video. Stay safe out there. Out of all the places you could go to clear your mind, the Appalachian Trail is supposed to be one of the safest. Thousands of people walk those same paths every year looking for peace, silence, maybe even a fresh start. And most of them find exactly that. But not everyone. Some people hear footsteps that never show themselves. Some meet strangers who seem to know more than they should. And some walk into places they were never meant to find in the first place. And the worst part is, none of these stories sound impossible. There's no ghosts floating in front of you, no obvious monsters chasing you through the woods, just small details, subtle things. The kind of moments you could almost explain away if they didn't keep happening. So if you ever decide to hike alone, miles away from the nearest road, with no signal, no help, and no one around to hear you, just remember this: you might not be as alone as you think. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. And if you enjoy real unsettling stories like these, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. We upload new stories regularly, and if you've ever experienced something strange, whether it happened in the woods at work or even in your own home, you can send your story through the email in the description. Who knows? Your story might be the one that keeps someone else up all night. Stay safe out there.